Okay, we're going to get started because the few minutes we lose at every spot, you're going to take out a lunch. So you guys are going to eat fast if we don't hurry. So hello, I'm Linda Finley. Welcome to the MAC, both the McNamara Alumni Center and also the Midwest Architecture Collaboration Community Conference. We are very, very glad you're here. This is our first year doing this, and we knew that we had something when we got started, and you're all here to show us that. And we're just very excited about that. So I'll tell you a couple of things about the day, and then each of the people representing the various communities, the architecture communities in the Midwest here, the Twin Cities that got together and decided to do this thing, will say a couple words about their community. So you should be able to hear your leader if you're part of an active community in the Twin Cities or are with our Des Moines friends and others that have traveled a little further than, there you are, Alex, I see you, a little further than just down the street. So this is, as I said, the MAC conference, and we started this conference because we know that we're better together, let's just say that. We have a number of communities that are active and working in architecture, in the individual domains of architecture, but there are several of us who got together who are well-networked, been working together in a friendly way for years, and we decided that we think that there's a healthy and productive codependency that needs to exist between architecture domains, architects, and so on, to make business better, to add value to the business. So basically, that's why we did this. And we think that we're onto something, as I said, because we've got a really successful set of speakers, people, venue, and we're just really happy about the way this is turning out. So a couple of things logistically about today. Your program, you all have a program, you all have a gift bag and a program. On page 3 of the program, you've already found it. This is how the day is going to go. We have a ton of stuff going on today, so it will go pretty tight from thing to thing. Luckily, the venue is really tight here. You don't have a long distance to travel. There's a map in here, and you can see where you're going to go next. If you see what, this is the map. If you see what track you're interested in, we have track leaders in each room that will be making sure that the needs are met in the room, and we have people introducing our speakers in each room, obviously. Let's see, the restrooms, if you haven't found them already, I think that they're out there. Has anyone been to the restroom yet? Right out there. The registration table we'll have committee members at most of the day, certainly during the breaks and so on, and so you can get more information or what you need there. Please make a point of stopping by and visiting our sponsor tables, because the sponsors that showed up helped us make this available to you for $79. Our goal was to not have any barriers for you coming to this, and the price point is extremely low relative to the kind of things, the kind of value you're going to get today from our speakers and so on. So, now, moving on into the introduction. So I'm part of an organization, community of practice in the Twin Cities that we started almost 5 years ago, the Twin Cities Business Architecture Forum. Many of my community members are out here, and I see you. We have been meeting every 2 months consistently for almost 5 years, and we meet at various locations, various sponsor locations. We move around the cities based on the location of our sponsors. They host meetings. So you can go out to the LinkedIn site. There's some things over there that talk about the organization. But it's a great, thriving community of practice. We have 60, 70, 80 people at every meeting. There's a lot of networking, a lot of collegial information sharing that goes on at that. So that is me. You're going to see me again a couple of times. But right now, we're going to move on to Yosef is next. And he's going to talk about he'll tell you.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming. We appreciate taking the time to learn and share. I represent the Enterprise Architecture Partnership, Twin Cities. It's a web-based community of practice. We started about in October 2012. We have about 252 members, and we have about 100 type of discussions covering topics such as industry trend, architecture role, and communication, humor, and infrastructure. We have about 40 different companies that participated in this, like United Healthcare Group, Thrivent Financial, Cargill, and Target. What makes the EAPTT unique is focus on the communication, enterprise architecture communication people, as well as it's one thing unique about it, it's online. So please, if you would like to register, anyone can assign it, go to the LinkedIn and search for EAPTT. The person owner of this group, her name is Marina Corbell, and unfortunately she will be here a little bit late. Thank you.
Dave is at the registration table, so we're going to jump to Johan.
Yeah, my name is Johan Wetström. I represent the Localizer Chapter. We are a member of the much larger ISA Global organization, where you can go out and see on isaglobal.org. We meet once every month on a roundtable, and then we provide other events. And Don Howard will have a little bit better presentation of what ISA, local, and global can provide right before Paul Pre's speech. And we're very proud to be part of this event, and we think we have some great speakers. So good luck.
Here's Dave.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Dave Slough. Welcome. I'm with Twin Cities Architecture Roundtable. The Roundtable is a board-based group here in the Twin Cities, and we were formed for exactly this kind of reason. The collaboration that has brought this together has been fabulous. Obviously, a number of different groups here around the Twin Cities, but being able to get together face-to-face, not only hear about the things that your colleagues are doing, but also talk to your peers is exactly what the Roundtable is about and is exactly what MAC is about. So I just want to say welcome and enjoy the day. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Jenny Fox from Lifescale Analytics, and I've been working with the MAC committee in the role of marketing and sponsorships. On May 19th, I met this group of people for the first time at the Good Day Cafe. As architects and consultants, they all knew each other, of course. As a marketing person, I just thought they were flippin' crazy. The concept was to bring 6 organizations together to put on a major event in less than a year. I was happy to help, but I had my doubts. Here we are, only 6 months later, and with industry-leading keynote speakers, top-notch session presenters, quality sponsors, and surpassed our attendance goal. And we all worked our day jobs. All the research I've done says that this should not have happened, but obviously these guys did not get that memo. The only way I can explain it was the sheer determination and the dedication to the architectural community here in the Midwest, and the belief in that the practice of architecture really does matter. And obviously you believe it too because you're here. I'd like to take just a minute to thank the incredible sponsors that came forward to make this event possible. And please take the time to thank them personally also. Visit their tables. Like Linda mentioned, you know, they've really put in a lot of time, resources, and energy to be here. The organization I'm representing today is BCOP, the Business Enterprise Architecture Community of Practice. It's a community sponsored by DBI Consulting and founded by Dan Berglove, who couldn't be here today. As consultants and architects, I'm sure you know you're oftentimes taken out of state at the last minute to work, and that's where he's at in North Carolina. He started BCOP as a platform for learning and networking with peers around the solutions and strategies for practical and successful architecture practices. We host events called Focus 90 throughout the year, featuring guest speakers who share real-world experiences on everything from strategy, solutions, governance, agile, and more. There's no membership per se. Everyone is welcome to attend Focus 90 events. We encourage you to take a postcard from the table. There's a table back there that represents all of our organizations, so all of the material is back there. It has the Big Mac logo on it. We have a LinkedIn group. If you go there and join the group for free, you'll receive information about when the events are happening. So again, it's amazing to see what can happen in 6 short months. And if you find value out of this day, learn something new, and meet some great people, then the craziness was worth it. Thank you so much.
Okay, I'm just going to mention one more thing before Bill Estrom talks and introduces our first keynote, and that is that lunch is back here. I thought you'd want to know that. So the breakouts, there are 2 breakout sessions, and then we're back here for lunch. So after, keynote, 2 sessions, back here for lunch. Want to make sure you knew that that was where it was. Bill Estrom.
Well, good morning, everybody. Before we get too much farther, I'd like to see if we could give a little round of applause to Jenny for the work that she's done to really help move this thing forward, and Linda also has been a really great leader and organizer. But Jenny, thank you so much. So I'm the chairman of the local Association of Enterprise Architects, and we've been at it for a long time. We started probably back in the 2002 timeframe with a kind of a private group of architects that got together to meet periodically to kind of discuss some of the common issues that they're having. And then around 2004, we decided to kind of open it up to a broader public audience, and so we formed what was lovingly known as the Twin Cities Architectonians. And so from that point, we operated for several years. And then, I think it was around 2009, we became part of the open groups, at that time called the Association of AOGIA, Association of Open Group Enterprise Architects, which then later became the Association of Enterprise Architects. So we meet probably just about every quarter, and we've had some really, really good, successful events, and encourage you to come to our meetings. There are no dues or anything like that. You can just join us, and we'd love to have you. So AEA is a professional organization, a global professional organization with about 40,000 members. It works to be the definitive association for enterprise architecture profession, and tries to strengthen the practice of enterprise architecture and improve the recognition of enterprise architecture and the practitioners of enterprise architecture in the community. So that's the major features of the Association of Enterprise Architects. We do have a table back there with some copies of our peer-reviewed journal that we publish. I'm one of the members of the editorial board, and it's kind of interesting work to look at some of the things that are going on in the community of enterprise architecture right now. So I'm really happy that we're able to have this group today and get all the different types of architects together in one room, and hopefully we'll have a lot of good fellowship and networking and discussion today. So now I'd like to turn my attention to introducing our first keynote speaker, Alan Brown. I have known Alan probably for about 20 years now. We met first when we were in the midst of the process of forming the Open Group back around 2003, 2004 timeframe. And so I've been affiliated with the Open Group in one way or the other ever since then, and so I've been working with Alan for quite a long time. And I was really pleased that he was able to join us today for one of our keynotes. So Alan is the president and CEO of the Open Group and has been in that role since 1998. The Open Group, if you don't know, is a global consortium that really tries to achieve business objectives through the development and promulgation of IT standards. And so some of the standards that we work on are things like the Unix standard, the Unix brand, but also we have standards like the TOGAF, the Open Group Architecture Framework, things like that. So there's a wide variety of different types of standards that are developed by the Open Group. Alan has held a wide range of senior management positions, both in financial management and operational management. He is TOGAF 9 certified and holds an MBA from the London Business School and is a fellow of the Chartered Certified Accountants. So I'm pretty well qualified to talk to us today about things that are going on in enterprise architecture. So Alan, I'd like to invite you up on stage, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Well done. Thank you very much. Good morning. Shall I play? I need to get that thing out of the way, don't I? And it was working, so there's a problem. There you go. Well, that's not actually the slide we're going to look at. That was what Bill was talking about. So, okay. Gotcha. Okay. So, good morning. This is what we're going to talk about. What a great venue. Makes up for the weather outside, doesn't it? Eh? So we're going to try and race through this by 9:30, and I'm going to try and lead you through what I see from the Open Group and from our members of how significant enterprise architecture is to them. So amongst other things, I'm going to race through some case studies. There's just little extracts from the full case studies that have been presented at Open Group conferences over the years. We start off with the airline industry. We'll look at healthcare and pharmaceuticals. There's national governments, coal, oil and gas, home loans and savings. And if we've got time, I'll look at a small company's enterprise architecture, which is the Open Group itself, in a little bit of detail, but not as much as I'd really like to do. Before that, just reinforce what Bill said, the Open Group is a consortium. And just to explain what that is, I borrowed this from Wikipedia, which saved me making it up myself. Right? So we're not individuals, it is companies, organizations, enterprises, academics are involved as well, coming together to achieve a common goal. There is no ownership as such, there's no stockholders, shareholders or owners, so every part of the net income goes back into reinforcing what we're doing for our members. And we are strictly vendor neutral, which means that we are very careful to be vendor and technology neutral. And regardless of whether you're a one-person organization that's a member or a multinational member, you still have one vote in each of the work groups that you're participating in. So, as Bill said, about 20 years ago, between 1998 and 2002, the Open Group went through its own cathartic experience and a transformation. And we were looking to our CIO customer members to help us with where we would go in the future. And we were talking about interoperability, and they said, actually, let's explain the problem. And the Boeing CIO gave us this chart which explains exactly their problem at that time. And it sustains for a number of other organizations right now. So what they said was that we have an end-to-end process where we buy materials, we make airplanes, and then we sell them. And it's a very slow process. It's not very competitive. We've got competitors coming along. Airbus were in the room when we were discussing this, and so were a few others. And they all agreed. And that the challenge was that over the years, they've been doing what many other organizations have been doing, which is to break down the stovepipes and silos and get people working cross-functionally. And when they're working cross-functionally and trying to get people to work together, they find that each functional department has got their different cultures. So finance wouldn't talk very easily to sales or to distribution or manufacturing, and they had to break that down. So over the years, many organizations broke that down by this time. GE actually wrote the book about the boundaryless organization. Now the problem, as Boeing explained it to us, and Airbus and the others explained, is that although we've got people working together, the challenge is that all of the applications were all built for those siloed functional departments with no expectation that they would ever need to communicate with any of the others. And when you've got these cross-functional teams, what you need to do is to be able to access the information from each of these teams, integrate it in some way, and make it useful for those teams. And of course, they couldn't do that. And they needed the information to flow between these functional departments, be consolidated, and be available to those authorized to see it. They needed information to flow in some way. And it was a very complex environment. So I did ask them, how many applications are you running? And how many business partners have you integrated your infrastructure with? And they went away for a few days, and they came back, and they said, we actually don't know how many applications we've got. We do know that we've integrated our infrastructure with more than 1,000 different business partners. And this was 2002. And it's very complex. You don't know where the boundaries of your organization are. I spoke to the GM CIO a few years later, and she told me that at any one time, through their business partners, there are 500,000 people inside their infrastructure, legitimately, that were not employees of Lockheed, actually, Lockheed. And where that went to was, you know, what are they doing with my infrastructure? So out of that, our members, and Bill was actually very closely involved with this, he worked hard on this, we developed this concept, this vision of boundaryless information flow. And not just boundaryless information flow, that would be like saying, we're going to put a man on the moon, right? You have to also say, we're going to return him safely to Earth within the next 10 years. And we kept with interoperability, but also the security, reliability, and timeliness. Now, boundaryless doesn't mean there are no boundaries. This is what Jack Welch said. That would be silly, but you need people to think in a boundaryless way, and you need the information to be available in a boundaryless way. So that's where we went. Now, today, it's much more complex. The technology is accelerating, the opportunities are accelerating, the risk is increasing, and people's expectations through their own devices, through cloud, through everything else they do, they expect more than ever before from the IT function. And what we need to do as enterprise architects is to have professional people, and we're very focused on having professional people with common standards. If we want to become a profession, this is what we have to do. If you look at any other profession, they have common standards. You know, the accountants have double entry bookkeeping, a way of recognizing revenue, a way of laying out their expenses, a way of structuring a balance sheet, which is common everywhere. It's a common standard. They have standards for how you do a lot of things. A lot of people think that some professions were created by law, like accountants. Well, the only law, the first law about accountants in the UK was to ban them, because they self-developed themselves as professionals, and they were helping people with their debt problems, because everyone went to debtor's prison. They were helping people with their debtor's problems, and of course the accountants were stealing all these people's money. So the first law talking about accountants and the profession was to ban accountants for some time. So we need those common standards, we need those professional people. The Open Group itself, we've got 468-something memberships signed in actually 39 different countries. If you spin that out to the number of people involved, some organizations like American Express, Shell, BP, IBM, HP, Oracle, they've got thousands of people everywhere. A lot of them tracking us. So we've got hundreds of thousands of people in many, many more countries than that. And there's a few examples. We've got the people from Minnesota included there, but we've also got many other countries in the world you might recognize, from Japan to the Netherlands, to the UK, to France, everywhere around the world. And the way that we try and work is to understand what our members need. We define our members as either customers of IT products and services or vendors of IT products and services. We understand their needs. We work that through a forum or work group. We have a standards process where we can develop standards, white papers, best practices, guides, a certification process for conformance to that, and many different certification processes, get the market adoption and make that valuable. And all the time, the members are networking and building and learning and developing themselves. But central to all this is the concept that there is no value in fragmenting standards. And what we try to do is to collaborate with as many different standards organizations as possible. Here's a few examples. The banking industry with Buy-in, with the Telemanagement Forum for the telcos, with the DoD, with Osaka for COBIT, with ITIL in their previous existence, and with the OMG. With the Open Group is also an ISO-recognized submitter, and over the years they've adopted standards from the Open Group. Most recently around SOA, they've just adopted those two in the last couple of years, and they've taken a large amount of our standards on cloud recently. So working with these organizations is really important. We don't just do architecture. If you think about the complexity and the risk and everything else, our members want to deal with all of these things. So we're dealing with managing complexity through architecture, risk through risk analysis, which is just a part of what our security guys are working on, managing the business of IT in our new forum, IT for IT, which is all about how the IT function can manage itself, get its arms around the entirety of the IT, initially build a reference architecture for the IT function. Managing the supply chain, there is risk of maliciously tainted and counterfeit products being developed in global supply chains of products, and we're trying to mitigate that. The emerging platform of SOA, cloud, big data, Internet of Things, social, mobile, all of those coming together. And you're annoying. And professional people, T-shaped people, people that have got depth of knowledge and the breadth of skills, capabilities, and experience. Okay, so we're going to go back to these case studies. I am going to race through them as well as I can. So the first one is Cathay Pacific. This was given at our conference in Taiwan a few years ago. Cathay, obviously, based in Hong Kong. And they started off with their business problem. The airline industry is amazingly cyclical. One year they can make $25 billion of profit. The next year they can make $25 billion of loss. In 2008, they had the highest oil prices ever. And in 2009, they had the global financial crisis. That wasn't enough of their problems, of course. They also had a changing industry, low-cost carriers coming in, competition for pricing, consumers shopping around on the internet for the best tickets, unbundling of services. So now you have to pay extra for food, alcoholic beverages at least, on some carriers, the beverages themselves. In fact, Ryanair, an Irish-based low-cost carrier, was in fact seriously talking about how we can charge customers on the airplane extra for using the restrooms, right? All of these things are coming along, and obviously there's alliances, the alliance partners they've got to be able to integrate with, and they've got to be prepared for mergers and acquisitions. So those two things together said, we need enterprise architecture. Google says you can't. And what I want to focus on this slide very quickly is that the architects got themselves involved in the strategy, in the procurement process, in the strategic IT, in the annual IT capital budgeting process, and looking at all the cross constraints and so on. They used the ADM and the architecture content framework, the architecture development method, and the content framework from TOGAF. And if anyone's building out their own capability, in TOGAF 9, there is this capability framework to guide people. What they learned were a lot of things. So the airline industry is very, very, very focused on cost. And they express everything in cost per passenger mile. So what they did for the architecture is all their KPIs were expressed in cost per passenger mile. The enterprise architects weren't in the ivory tower. They were embedded in projects and working with people. And those two things are really, really critically important. British Airways also used TOGAF. What they did that was interesting, and this was a presentation, not an open group conference, they talked about how they'd certified or had all their business analysts take the TOGAF exam because they wanted everyone to speak the same language. And that's something we hear a lot. If everyone speaks the same language, they use the same standards, life gets a lot easier. Moving to South Africa now, an organization with a revenue of $18 billion a year. They have proprietary technologies for improving coal and oil and gas. And they had the problem that arose from the oil prices in 2008, and it hit their share price. And what they chose to do, their CEO decided we were going to improve our functional departments, procurement, those kind of things, IT. And from that arrow at the top there, one of the things I'm identifying a lot in case studies is that enterprise architecture isn't about cutting cost. It used to be just about cutting cost. The emphasis now is on improving capability in one form or another, and by the way, we will also reduce cost. Okay? So what they did here, they said it was a simple approach. I think it's amazing. They brought together the enterprise architects with the folks from HR, from organization design, which is the OD, and from change management professionals. And they brought them together and brought their skills together to form a team which included project managers, and the project managers worked with them, and they had all of these enabling streams. Now, if you work in South Africa and you do anything really, really good, you have the opportunity to take your plan to the top of the highest peak in South Africa. It's something that they like to do, and they're very welcome to it. This project was so successful in the annual financial statements of that year, they talked about how they'd standardized their processes and centralized their functions to the point that this was giving them clear competitive advantage across their global footprint. And, by the way, not only have we improved our functional effectiveness, we've got more competitive advantages, we've improved our capabilities, we've also, by the way, saved 1 billion rand, which, as anyone here already knows, is about 100 million US dollars. So that's not a bad saving. Where'd that come from? That is not on my screen. We will now have a short intermission while I figure out how to get rid of that. I've got no idea where it is.
Come out of it.
So while they're doing that, I'll just carry on. So this was amazingly successful, and they learned a lot of lessons that are very similar lessons. You need the drive from the top. You need to be pragmatic. You need to have principles and stick to the principles. You need to do all these things. Now, the one thing that went slightly wrong with this organization was that they reached the goal so well that they said, okay, we're done. And then the architects were like, okay, what do we do now? And they were a bit out in the wilderness for a while. And just now, they've, as an organization, realized that this should be a continuous process, and it's not, okay, you're done. You need to continue with the process. And in actual fact, they're just reigniting it and rejoining the open group as we speak. Thank you, Bill. So there you go. That's all that lot. Rio Tinto is another mining organisation. They gave a great presentation in Sydney at one of our conferences, and that was where Rio Tinto are. South Korean government joined the Open Group in 2002 and adapted TOGAF for their government-wide enterprise architecture. And of course, the result now is that they are the undisputed e-government leader in the world. And I'm told, not by them, but I'm told that because they've done so well, they're able to sell their know-how to other developing countries, and they've made about $1 billion out of that so far. Amazing. Healthcare in Canada, that's not too far away. Their problem was that the healthcare expenditure, as you can see from that chart, was rising at a rate much faster than GDP. They thought the problem was the pager system, and the way the pager system works in hospitals is nurse contacts, pages the doctor, doctor's with patient, doctor can't answer nurse, finishes with patient, calls the nurse, nurse is away from her station, leaves a message, she gets back to him, and it goes on all day. So it's very inefficient, but it wasn't the whole problem. So what they wanted to do was to understand the whole problem. Now, the person that was the lead architect on this is what I would call a T-shaped person. Not only did he have the knowledge in depth, he also had a lot of skills and capabilities. And in fact, he's not only TOGAF certified and Archimate certified, he's also Open Group CA certified, which is a professional peer review certification. You fill in a package according to the standards. It's got soft skills as well as technical skills. You have to have used a method, but it doesn't have to be TOGAF. It's completely neutral on that. And, you know, you go before a board of 3 of your peers, can you convince them, and so on. So, and there are 3 levels that are fairly easy entry level going up to the higher level. Understanding the whole problem was a big issue, so they immersed themselves in a lot of journals, he immersed himself in going on a course intended for healthcare professionals so they could learn the language. got all the stakeholders involved, understood that there were significant challenges in that industry. It is a knowledge industry, but not one that wants to learn about things like IT. They also had situations where healthcare workers work in shifts, and one shift could have a patient that couldn't speak English and they couldn't communicate, and it was very difficult. Another shift just happened to know the phone number of his daughter who could translate, right? Things like that happened. So they did all this. They applied Archimate as well. So Archimate was a big part of what they were doing. That chart isn't part of that. That's actually out of Archie. The modeling tool, Archie, is available for free download, and it gives you a good entry into this. Obviously, there are people that provide other tools, professional tools, around here, and it's well worth looking at. So what came out of Ontario initially was a cloud-based solution that gave people different views. One view was, who's on my team today, who's off sick, who's on vacation, who's covering, do I have any messages, do I have any communication issues, patient detail was another view, and they moved from there. The effect, of course, was to have efficiency gains, which meant that everything got better. We reduced the length of stay, everyone's happier, and the readmission rates are low, and of course, that led to a lowering of the cost of healthcare. Novartis is a pharmaceutical organization, $57 billion. Very briefly, they started enterprise architecture, but it's really the capability planning that was their driver. In Slovakia a few weeks ago, we were talking to the Director General there about how they're doing enterprise architecture in Slovakia. And their problem, being a recently not communist country, is that how you say it? Whatever. Their community was now really desperate to get access to good information that was useful to them on time, because everything was slow, everything was late, and everything else. They had to change quite significantly. So they started building out their architecture function and had a lot of results so far. Home loans and savings in the UK. This organisation did a presentation a while ago. They had a gap in their EA function, which was business architecture. So they went out and hired a business architect, and everything got so much better then because they had a better understanding of the business and more credibility with the business. You're probably more familiar with Fannie Mae here. They did a great presentation at one of our conferences about TOGAF and how they use it. I said I'd talk about a small company, the Open Group, and how we had to deal with things. So you can imagine a non-profit has no reserves. We're not supposed to make profit. We don't make losses, but we don't make profit as such. Right? We don't have any owners to ask for more money. We don't have the ability to go to the bank to borrow because we've got no assets apart from the people. And we've got no way of raising capital. So given that, we also had a number of issues. We had a burning platform, a database that wasn't being maintained. The suppliers hadn't maintained it for years. We had applications that were built on it in home-developed languages. That's great for a standards organization. The security and compliance was getting worse and worse. And so our approach to that was to try and develop our own people, which was going to take time. Ask members for help, which we got. We got some training, we got some guidance from some people, and we went really looking for open source solutions. Up to September 2009, that's where we got to. Of course, all of that is now filled out. Outsourcing the credit card to comply with PCI was a big part of, took some worry away from me, and the association went live. Obviously, we didn't just use TOGAF. We used UML at the time because Archimate didn't exist. We'd now use Archimate because that is much more appropriate. In fact, I now find it a great way, not just for architecture, but for modeling any process. Right? But we also developed our own operating model based on enterprise architecture strategy, that great book that came out of MIT. Principles were important, as long as you can understand the principles. We didn't have too many, we didn't have too few. And we drove everything from our strategy through our drivers' smart objectives. We went through all the basic approaches. We had our enterprise continuum. So our challenge is no surprises there. Money, developing people, And the two at the bottom really were, when you're trying to do something new and develop something that's going to take a little while, and someone comes along and says, I've got a customer, we've got to change something, guess what happens? You put things off. And we had to have strategies for how we're going to keep the architecture going and keep the new things going. Otherwise, it would have taken 10 years longer. We didn't complete all the detail. And the other thing is that life goes on. So while we're trying to do this, new products come along, new requirements come along, new compliance issues come along, new risks come along, and you have to adapt that. And when we were testing out the new solutions with our end users, it was, one of those lessons learned, which is that they've got day jobs too. And, just asking them to drop everything and test these things was going to be challenging, so we had to have ways of getting around that. The great thing for us as an organization was that it stopped the technical folk leaping to this solution space, which is a great tendency for people to do. And we reused whatever we could. Challenges were cost and expertise and examples. And we're going on, so now the open source stuff has kind of reached the limits of what it can do as we grow and expand. So we're moving the context stuff into the cloud. The core is remaining, but on hosted servers. And we continue to move on. So I wanted to spend a little bit of time on what business architects actually do. And I know there's a few business architects in the room, so you may or may not resonate with this. I surveyed these guys before going to our conference in Sydney. And I'm not a great fan of surveys that say, I know the answer, score it on 1 to 9. Right? I like open-ended questions, and I asked a lot of open-ended questions and got a lot of feedback, and that finished up with a lot of discussion. So on the customer side, the feedback was coming from mobile phone operators, broadband, electricity network operator. The government departments, they were great. I was asking them, where do you report? In the CIO's area or to the minister? And they said, no, we report to the business lines. It's okay. You're a government department, you report to the business line? Yeah, we are a business. Banks, energy companies, mutuals, and telecom providers. So they're kind of some of the things. Now, they all talked about this three-legged stool for enterprise architecture. They believed that they are all part of enterprise architecture, but they depend on business analysts and other EA members, such as solution, application, data, all the other architects. They all said that it's a new discipline. They talked about being a pioneer. It's largely missing. They all talked about the necessity of having a company-wide or industry-wide model. And the Open Group is looking at how we can do more. We do have some industry reference models, which are great. We'd like to do more. It depends on the expertise of the people, and a lot of these people had a consulting background, which was interesting. What they were focused on a lot was models, value chains, value streams, and capability mapping. A lot of that going on in these organizations. And while you're reading that, I'll just mention the reason for the pencil is to remind me that one of the guys I was speaking to, and the other sort of resonated with it afterwards, was the most valuable tool I have is a pencil and a piece of paper. So, interesting stuff. Now, other things that we need to be aware of as architects, one is our own professional development and growing into these T-shaped people. The fact that risk is increasing and we need to be aware of it. What's happening with the new platform, cloud, mobile, big data, social mobile, and the impact on us from the Agile, the Lean, the DevOps communities. So I mentioned the T-shaped people, and I mentioned in the Ontario example of the lead architect there and how he worked. We're very keen to have more people step up to take that peer review and be recognized not just for passing the exam, which is great, but actually for showing that you do have the skills, the capabilities, the experience for being an open certified architect. And on the IT specialist side, there are about 19 streams of different IT specialisms that people can step up to. Professionalism is important. For the analysis of risk, we have a relatively new certification program, not as big as TOGAF, obviously. It's based on the two standards of the Open Group, the risk taxonomy and the risk analysis framework. It's called Open Fair. I'd encourage people to take a look at that. And, you know, the risk taxonomy lays things out as you would expect. It's reasonably common sense, like most standards. So you're looking at risk being a combination of what's the possible loss and how likely is it to occur, and then breaking it down. And there's trees that go for all of these loss factors and primary and external and internal and remediation and so on. I've got 2 minutes. I was having a great conversation with some lawyers a little while ago that were talking about the Open Group and saying, you know, if our people are doing presentations at your conference, they might be liable if someone's injured at the conference. And I said, really? They said, yeah. So I said, how does that work? And they said, well, you know, if someone slips and falls, there could be liability for our people giving that presentation. So I checked with some ambulance chasers and did some research and came back the next day and I said, you sure about this? They said, yeah. I said, okay. If someone slips and falls in here, this organisation is liable. If they slip and fall in the hotel's liable. If they slip and fall in your office, your company's liable. If they slip and fall in my house, I'm liable. So tell me, under what circumstances in a conference, if I was leading a group and someone slipped and fell, I would be liable? And they said, well, they could trip over your briefcase. Yeah, lawyers. One day they will be used to put out forest fires. So, Open Platform 3.0, this is the convergence of social, mobile, cloud, big data, Internet of Things, and SOA is kind of in and partly in. So this is an area that our members are now working on to try and get standards and best practices, and it is going to affect your choices for solutions when you're looking at enterprise architecture. This is something that's coming at us really quickly. What they're doing currently, they've done a lot of use cases, and those use cases have been based on business requirements. They're now looking at some building blocks and some architectural patterns for it, and they're working quite well on that. The Internet of Things is a work group within the Open Platform Forum, and the Internet of Things, if you ever have to deal with, you know, sort of a building like this, there's a lot of things like air conditioning and refrigeration and plumbing and everything else that you might want to understand how it works, how healthy it is, get feedback from it. And so you'd have devices on all of these things, and organizations would value that. So these two standards together, we believe, or they tell me, will do for things what HTML and HTTP did for the internet, for the web. And the example here is building management. As I said, if you've got a building management company that's got multiple buildings, they add some, they take some away. If you're using these IoT standards, you can collect a lot of information and you can rapidly integrate new buildings, or you can rapidly take out buildings you've passed on, and you can optimize their health and the maintenance of the building. Agile and DevOps. So I think it's fashionable. There's a lot of things that are fashionable, but I think this is fashionable. It's attractive because it's got this rapid, we're going to get there quickly thing. Right? I think there's a great risk that we could be put under pressure to leap to the solution space too quickly if this isn't done in a controlled manner. So that worries me as a CEO, that we're not going to leap to that. Now, the good news is that the Agile movement does talk about documentation. Now, I haven't seen a lot of documentation in any development, to be honest, for software development, but Agile should be documented as well. So it doesn't say it's not documented. DevOps is a two-part word, so it's not just the developers. And TOGAF is designed to be iterative. So if you're in an organization that's going to do Agile and DevOps, embrace it. It's potentially a good thing if done the right way, but be a player. Whether it's a Scrum team or a DevOps team or a change management team, whatever, be involved, be a player, speak the language of the organization, know what they want. Don't be in the ivory tower. And whatever it does, our architects are now giving us a 2-week update, our architects, about a quarter of a person. But, you know, you need to be able to do things in every 30 days, because otherwise people will forget about you and move on. And if you can't show some progress in 30 days, you're really not doing your job. The reference up there to a blog I did was called, it's on our website, you can get it if you click on that somehow, when you get the materials, and it's called Future Shock, and it talks about the need to embrace more agile approaches with enterprise architecture without being agile as such. Wow, we're doing okay. Final thought, if you're an enterprise architect, here's the good news. Articles are coming out thick and fast. This is one in Tech Page 1 in September. Looking at payroll and growth rate, the highest premiums were going to employees in the analytics, architecture, and security arenas. And data architecture took the top spot. Second place was a 3-way tie between big data analytics, prescriptive analytics, and TOGAF. They didn't just say architecture, they said TOGAF, which is kind of nice. Finally, our next conference of the Open Group is in San Diego in February. What's it going to be like here in February? Yeah, I can tell. We're hoping that Nationwide and United Healthcare will be providing case studies then in much greater detail and much more knowledge than I can give you right here in those little glimpses I gave you of those keynotes. I'm going to have the fun of having John Zachman speak. If you've never seen him, he's the greatest entertainer that we have in our industry. He's absolutely great. And the weather will be amazing. So if you fancy a trip to San Diego, please come join us. Anyway, for now, thank you very much. It's been great talking to you. We have, yes. We've got 4 minutes left.
3-4 minutes for questions. Anyone have a question for Alan?
It's that. Yeah, so the question is, can I elaborate on where risk is increasing? And I think there's a bunch of people maybe that can do that. There are many more attacks. As someone said yesterday, there are 2 types of people, organizations in the world, those that have been hacked and those that don't know they've been hacked. Cybersecurity is a big agenda item now. Again, we had a security workshop yesterday, and the security guys sitting at the back there somewhere can fill you in on more during a break. But, you know, the challenge, of course, is that we don't necessarily know what's being stolen. We don't know how much it is. And if you look at some of the high-profile cases, you look at Home Depot, Target, you know, they've all lost massive amounts. And that's mainly credit card stuff, right? And passwords and so on. But, you know, now someone can come into your laptop very, very easily while you're surfing, get in there, and in 3 seconds they can take the information and any passwords and any credit card details you've got. So they're just getting better at that. And of course, with any law enforcement or any protection, the bad guys are ahead of the good guys, right? So it is increasing all the time.
You may want to mention the security, birds of a feather security.
I might want to mention it. When is it?
Here you go, Linda. Linda?
There's a security birds of a feather this evening, yes?
Yes. So just after you pick up your 2 fists of beverages at the reception, after this is over, you can walk into the Johnson Great Room and have a romping security discussion security architecture, security discussion with a really awesome panel of speakers. So we can wrap up our day that way if you have interest in this topic.
Security with beverages.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, how about that? I can do that.
One more question?
Well, thank you very much.
Okay.
All right, thank you.